Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Agree or Disagree, the podcast. It is I, Kevin Olenick, hoping that you are having a great start of the Back to season. Of course, you can add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenick, like Agree or Disagree, the podcast on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at KVOLE, Spreaker, KVOLE, Spreaker.com, Soundcloud.com, KVOLE, YouTube, Kevin Olenick, Instagram, KVOLE, and you can also subscribe on iTunes onto Agree or Disagree, the podcast. And of course, as I mentioned, it is the back to school time of year. And of course, the excitement of Tuesday happened. All over social media, pictures were posted, smiles, tears, and hugs were shared. And the phrase, "I can't believe my kid is blank years old." It's the beginning of a new year. It's a new chapter, new growth. Good things are coming. Growth, change, challenge. And even as we record this on a Thursday night, the excitement continues. Learning new things, meeting new people, maybe some move to a new area and we're making new friends. And we're glad to see old friends. But at some point, something may be off. There may be an awkward conversation. Someone's appearance that looks a little bit different. Some choices that were made that were awkward and not, in air quotes, cool. Some sort of personal struggle that happens. Then it can change. Many are bullied. Many are shamed. Many are sad. Many just simply struggle. They may not get something that they're supposed to be learning or that is so easy to learn. And they may be publicly shamed not only on social media per se, but in school as well. What do you do as a parent? What do you do as a teacher? What do you do as a friend? How do you navigate through this? We could spend hours on this, and the power of doing podcasts like this is we can open this conversation up and begin this topic at the beginning of the year. So our topic is mental health in our kids in our back-to-school time. Back-to-school theme, if you remember, yesterday we recorded a podcast on sex ed and public school. Today we're talking about mental health and our kids. And this is kind of part one of probably, hopefully, many different conversations that we'll have. And our guests tonight have worked and have much experience and have a lot to offer to bring in this area. After years of battling crippling anxiety, depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder, Alyicia Perreault found herself at a crossroad. She could either accept things as they were and continue on the same path, or she could find another way through and fight it. She chose to fight. She wrote a book that is a part memoir, part self-help, Taming Crazy, Confessions and Lessons is a Journey of Strength, Vulnerability, Courage, and Laughter. Told with humor, truth, and the occasional swear word, she shares the lessons she learned in her quest to climb out of the rabbit hole once and for all, often with hilarious results. This book is an honest raw portrayal of how paralyzing anxiety, OCD, and depression can affect daily life. Most importantly, it is a story of hope. And by the way, we did talk in the summer about the book. So Alicia, welcome back to Agree or Disagree, the podcast.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for coming back on. And where are you? Are you in the Okanagan or are you in Calgary?
I'm in Calgary today.
Okay. Well, hello to out there in Calgary. And also joining us, and when I asked her to join us, we are both part of a group called the Achievement Club, and I'm quoting, she said, it made me pee her pants, in a good way. She's done a lot of volunteer work with a number of tremendous organizations and has a lot to offer. And I'm maybe going to let, for the first time ever on a podcast, is this true, Kim Benson?
This is true, Kevin.
If there's any comfort to you, Alicia was first time on a podcast last time. So this is her second time, while this is your first time.
Excellent.
Yes. So, and I have really no idea what I'm doing. So we're all in the same thing together. So we're fine. It's going to be good. But maybe tell us from your perspective, what you've been through. Kind of tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, and hi, Alicia. So I have worked many years in the fields. I worked in the field of corrections for many, many years. As started out working with youth and then with corrections. Probably I have about 20 years experience in that area, and then started having kids of my own. And so when I left that field, when I started to have kids of my own, and probably about 3 or 4 years after the birth of my second, which is my son, I discovered that a lot of the things that you kind of talked about at the beginning, that some things he dealt with things a little bit differently. And so what we discovered was that he was struggling with his own mental health. And we were fortunate enough to find out really early, and have been able to go in far more informed into the path and hopefully provide him with some tools. But my son is now 12, and so we're learning this road together. And so I now am the parent of a child who has struggled with his own mental health, and working and learning every single day.
What are some key things that you have learned? Or what if maybe you could probably tell us for 4 hours, but maybe some things that are really some things that have really sparked you to get more involved or really move this conversation forward, I guess is the best way to do it.
I think for me, some of the most important things are building relationship and talking about it and having conversations, just opening up the conversation, whether it's with my son, whether it's with teachers, whether it's with friends, whether it's with colleagues. As I said, I've done work in this area in the past, and what I find, or with other parents, and what I find is that as you have these conversations, and as I talk about some of my own experiences, people then start to bring forward their own experiences, or at least start to think about that this is okay to talk about. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is we really need to have more of these conversations so that we can prepare young people and help support families and community members and everybody involved in children's lives, so that they can be supported in their lives.
Yeah. I think maybe let's start kind of there. You might talk about we need to have more of these conversations. So in the previous podcast, when we talked about
you want me to talk about having more of the conversations?
Oh, hear me out. I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
As you said.
Go ahead. Hello? Did I lose you? Is everyone there?
I'm here.
Okay. Kim, are you still there? Kim? Right. So yeah, continue.
Alrighty.
Yeah, Kim, go ahead.
So I think that, the biggest thing is just what I've come to most of my conversations with, whether it be with teachers or parents or friends or whoever else is involved in mine or my children's lives, is just being really transparent and honest about my experiences and talking about what's really going on, because I think so many people struggle, whether it's the young person themselves or the families or the people involved, whether it's teachers and other professionals. They know something's going on, but nobody's talking about it. And I think that's what I've noticed is the more that I bring forward things and build those relationships and have those honest conversations, the more that is going to support my son and both my children. Really, I have 2 children, and it's important to be having those conversations as a whole, so that we really understand the big picture and that our kids can feel supported. Now, it doesn't mean going out and sharing all the gruesome detail with absolutely everybody, but celebrating the successes too. Like, I don't want to put my kids in a position where they're feeling embarrassed or like they can't talk about something, but at the same time, I want them to know that it's okay to talk about these things. One of the examples I'll give is when my son was originally going through treatment. He went into an inpatient treatment center when he was in grade 2, and so he was away from school for 6 weeks, and he was able to come back and actually talk about that experience and talk about, and I think one thing I'm grateful for with him being so young is that he could have those conversations. And at that age, kids aren't necessarily as judgmental as they might have been when they are older. So he was able to come back and actually talk about where he was and what happened. And in grade 3, he actually gave a presentation to his classroom around anxiety and what that was, and that it was normal, and that people experience anxiety in lots of different ways. So those were some pretty amazing moments to be able to celebrate, to say where we were breaking down the walls of some of the stigma and some of the judgments that can happen, and showing other people and modeling that those conversations are okay and we should be having them, or we need to have them in order to support our kids and our families.
Alicia, what do you have to say? You probably have lots to
say. I mean, it does start with talking about it. And I mean, it's just conversations like we're having right now that we have within our communities in a non-clinical way a lot of times that helps normalize mental and emotional wellness. I think I was reading that according to the Mental Health Commission of Canada, an estimated 1.2 million children in Canada alone are affected by mental illness, but only 20% will get treatment. And those kids grow up to be adults with mental health issues. So I think it's really important that we talk about it really early and just normalize it. Just like we talk about physical health, we need to be talking about mental health. And we're getting there. I mean, it is getting a little bit easier to share things. You know, it took me a long time to talk about my issues because it's something I learned to hide away at a very young age. But the more we talk about it, the more other people talk about their issues at the same time. So I think it's really important just talking. And, you know, I do want to say it's a really good idea to seek professional help if your child is suffering, but it's parents that will do the most for their child. They know when they're suffering. And I think that we have a lot to say to help our children through these issues.
So I'm curious because I don't have children, so there wasn't any permission slips or anything that I had to fill out or anything like that. When it is back to school this week, was there conversations that you know of around mental health issues, or at school? Did that come up?
I think, you know, I think starting school is really hard for a lot of kids. You know, some kids start out with butterflies because, you know, it's exciting to go back to school. But some kids have a great deal of anxiety, and it's created by, you know, all the thoughts of what if. What if is a really huge thing when you have anxiety, because you can think of 100 things that could go terribly wrong, and it can be extremely distressing. And there's a lot of unknowns. You know, it might be a new school, new teacher, making new friends, and that's really, really hard if you've already got anxiety issues. And I think sometimes as parents, you know, the first thing we need to take a breath, because emotions can be contagious, and we want to do everything we can to help our kids, which means that sometimes we jump in, and anxious parents can easily exacerbate the situation. But I think, you know, some kids go to school and they're just so excited to meet new friends, and then other kids go to school and it's excruciating. And I can tell you that for me, it was a very difficult time. So I can really feel for kids and parents at this time of year.
Kim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the important things that has been just so critical in our family is having those open conversations within our family so that we can talk about that. So my kids understand, like, they can talk about, for the most part, when they're feeling anxious, and they have language for that. So that's been a huge blessing. But I know at the beginning when we were first struggling and we didn't know, a lot of it was around behaviors that were coming out. And so trying not to make assumptions around what those behaviors are meaning and to ask questions. And for us, we're fortunate in this is my son's second year at the school he's at, so he's in middle school. And I've done a lot of work with the school system around and his teachers and really tried to build those relationships. And it has made a huge amount of difference because this year for him, he was actually excited to go back to school, which was a huge win because typically he is one of the kids that is paralyzed with fear going back. And we've had issues for years where he was doing school refusal and I, drive to the school and couldn't get him out of the car. And it was really challenging. And as a parent, watching your child in that much pain it's heart-wrenching and not knowing what to do. So I feel very fortunate that now some of the things that have helped is, again, he has allies at the school. He has people he can talk to. He describes it as people that get him, that understand the struggles that he has, that understand what some of his reactions or behaviors might mean, and that can help interpret that and help him to be able to talk about that and put strategies in place to have him be able to be successful. My daughter, on the other hand, who struggles with anxiety as well, started at a brand new high school and knew hardly anybody. And the last few days has been, the first day was okay. The second day was paralyzing. She didn't want to go back and she begged me not to go back. And again, that's like around that language. We were able to talk about it and I could support her to keep trying. But it's very challenging, and when kids are struggling, it's hard to know what to do in the moment because sometimes some parents will, well, you just have to push them or you just need to make them do it, and that's not always the right answer. The way that every child is different, and the strategies that work for every child are different, and every family, that it has to be really determined by the people that are involved in that interaction.
So this leads to teachers and resources. And at this point, maybe let's focus on resources first. How are we doing in terms of, I'm sure that we're improving, but what are the resources that are there? And what are the resources that are missing right now in terms of helping kids in these situations?
Alicia, did you want to speak? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my kids are not in the school system anymore, so I'm not quite sure what exactly. So you might have to speak about the resources that are already there. I can definitely speak about what's missing.
Okay.
So you go ahead.
Perfect.
I can speak within the school system. I mean, a lot of the resources that we have accessed have been outside of the school system. One of the things that I have as a parent really had to work hard at is being able to have all of those different resources that are working with my children talking to each other, because otherwise you're getting a bunch of silos and then the child just feels it's more and more challenging. So the resources that are there, I'd love to see them working better together, with the children and the family being a part of that. And that's a huge piece for me, is that when we talk about resources, the biggest resources that any professional have are the family and the child. And I don't know that we're always seen as an asset at the table. And when the child and the family are seen as an asset, I think it just goes so much further, because you're really working together as a team with everybody involved. And so within the school system, I would say unless a child is seriously acting out, within like that the staff have to do something about it, there's not a lot of support. There's a lot of kids. I have one child that acts out in a huge way. I have another child that you would never know anything was going on, and so I can tell you who got the resources sooner. And it's really tough to advocate for a child where people can't see what's going on, but that doesn't mean that they're in any less pain or any less struggle. And so I think teachers, the teachers that can work with the kids that are really struggling, I think we're getting more and more of them, and more people informed and more people willing. But there's still a lot of folks that don't want to talk about it and don't want to have anything to do with the kids that are struggling. They see them as a problem rather than as a behavior that's trying to tell them something else, which is really communication.
Go ahead, Alicia. What's missing? There's some things I want to dig out of there, Kim, after though too. But
yeah. You go ahead, Kevin, and talk about that, and then I can talk about what I'd like to see happen.
Yeah, the thing that was just striking to me is some people look at the child as a problem. And I remember when I was in school, there was always these kids that were behavior issues, and we didn't know what to do with them, and there was almost like a sense of throwing up your hands and almost giving up because you saw a behavioral issue. It sounds like you've had to do a lot of work to work with people to dig through that it's not just a simple behavioral issue, that there's more going on there. How do you navigate the frustration potentially of dealing with someone with, like, this is really important work and we got to dig through or climb the hill or continue to run the race or whatever slogan you want to use at this point in time?
It has been tough. It's been really tough. And as I said, I mean, my son, when he was younger, would act out violently. And so, in the school system, there's a zero tolerance for violence. And it's not that I don't agree with that. And it's not, but I think in what I've learned is in my journey is that, and even as a professional, when I was starting out really young, is that behavior is communication, and that trying to, there are some teachers and professionals that once you get into the conversation and build that relationship, they will go there with you. They will have that conversation and talk about strategies and talk about other ideas. And unfortunately, there are some folks in the system that aren't willing to have those conversations, that just say, no, they're a problem, they need to be gone, or this isn't working. But when we can open up that conversation and have people really see that the child is struggling and the behavior is a symptom, that's an expression of something deeper that's going on, then we can really start to get to the root of what's going on for the young person and how we can best support them. And I'm not suggesting that's easy, because as a parent, there have been lots of times where I've been exhausted, and and I'm sure as teachers and other professionals, it's exhausting. And if we don't do it, and we don't see the child for who they really are, and not just their behavior, then we're not supporting them at all. And so, again, I think the way I have been able to do that as a parent, or what's helped me, is by building those relationships, those trusting relationships with people, and keeping those lines of communication open. So I don't have all the answers, but together we can at least try and put more heads together to try and help figure out how to best support the child that's struggling.
Go ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, what I was thinking of, I mean, I think it's great that Kim is advocating for a child because that's what we have to do as parents. But I also think there's an awful lot of kids in the school system that don't have parents to advocate for them for some, for one reason or another. And I think it's those kids that we kind of have to step in as a community. I don't think teachers are prepared to deal with children with behavioral issues. They're just not equipped. So, what I'd like to see, and I think we're still a long ways off, is having life skills in school, in teaching right from kindergarten on what emotions are and how to process an emotion and what creates an emotion. And, we talked about this last time, Kevin, and I used the acronym T, which is thought, emotion, action. So if you know a child is, acting out with an action, it's because of the emotion, because emotions drive actions. And then if you look at that emotion, it's the thought that creates that emotion. So if we can simplify it and teach that to kids so that they get the power back on how they can create the emotion, and I'm not saying it's easy or this will work for every child, but I think it's a start. And, I do think that it's one of the reasons that bullying is on the rise. It's because there's so many people in emotional pain and they don't know how to process that pain. So they externalize it and put it on other children. And then the children that are bullied internalize that pain. I think it all boils down to knowing how to process emotions for a lot of us, because we just don't know. I mean, I know that was for me, and I'm speaking from what I've learned over the years, that it just comes down to that simple fact of how to deal with an emotion, and that it's okay to be afraid, and it's okay to be angry or sad or lonely or whatever that emotion is, and to sit in it, that it's normal to feel that way. But we're taught that, you're not to worry about things, and you got to think positive thoughts, and you shouldn't be unhappy. So then you start hiding those and you don't know how to process them. And I just think if we start at a very, very young age, teaching that in school, I think it'll go a long way to helping kids in the long run.
I would agree with that, Alicia. I think one of the things that I've worked to advocate for as well is, even before that, is actually teaching at university in the teaching programs, teaching teachers how to do that. Because I think you talked about having people that behavior, the thought, emotion, and action, and there's a lot of children that can't articulate their emotions. I think there's a lot of adults that can't articulate their emotions. So if those adults are teachers, then or professionals, or any community member that's interacting with a child, then we really need to start if we're talking about it in schools, we need to train teachers on how to deal with that, so they can feel more confident, and that they can support our community's children.
Absolutely, I agree.
So there's two caveats here I feel like we need to dig in: parents and teachers. So is it that parents won't advocate, or parents don't know how to advocate? Or is there some fear and stigma around parents and children with mental health because they're different than some other kids? And there's some shame around. Yeah,
I would agree. And I can tell you, and I can speak to my experience of it, is when my son was, when we were first struggling, his dad and I had just separated. So for at least, I would say at least a year, if not two, that's what got blamed. Well, you've been through a divorce, or you've been through a separation, and it's been a tough time, and the family's broken up. And so it got blamed on that rather than actually looking. And I knew something more was going on, and so I had to keep pushing and keep digging. But if I wasn't, as a pain in the butt as I am and advocating for my children, it wouldn't have happened. I could have gone away. And I think that's what happens for parents. And I can speak just for a moment around the resources that are out there and how to navigate those resources. And I think that's as somebody who had worked in the field and was now struggling with some of the stuff with my own family, I struggled to navigate the system, and I knew the system. And I can't imagine for a parent or a young person who's trying to navigate the system who has no clue what that system looks like or what all the challenges are with those competing systems, because there's so many. There's the school system. There's the medical system. There's so many different types of systems that you're dealing with. So I think parents can often just feel totally overwhelmed and just think it's them, or think that, oh, it must be bad parenting, or it must be, people they can't figure it out, so they don't keep trying. And I had somebody describe it to me once as, if you went to a mechanic to fix your car and you came home and the same noise was still happening, would you just go, oh, it's just the car? No, you'd go and find another mechanic. And I think we need to start thinking about it that way with our own physical and mental and emotional health. And if the mechanic or the professional or the person we went to isn't a fit, or we didn't get the answer that we feel comfortable with, and we know in our gut, then we need to keep trying. We need to keep pushing and go see someone else and keep talking and keep asking until you get the answers that you need. And unfortunately, I think that it's a combination of people don't know what to do, and or they get tired of trying, and they start to take it on them, think it's their own issues.
Well, you're right too, because I think if we were diagnosed now with either a heart condition, a cancer, or some sort of physical ailment, life-changing physical ailment, we will go to one or two different doctors to make sure where we are in terms of our physical condition. I don't see why that's any different in terms of our mental health, why we would not do that. Why would we just take the first diagnosis if you know or you feel something's different?
I think a lot of time is if you go to someone and they'll tell you something. And I can say this for myself. When I went to a doctor years and years ago, and I thought I was suffering from depression at the time, and I went to a doctor and he had said to me, do you feel suicidal? And I said, no. And he said, oh, so you don't feel like you could hurt yourself? I said, no. And he said, well, I don't think it's a depression. I think that you're just run down. And that to me was all I needed to hear, because the worst thing he could have said to me is you have depression. So when he said you're just run down, I went with that. I didn't go back and say, no, I think there's something more to that. I hung on to that for as long as I could, because I think at that time, and this was quite a few years ago, I did have the big stigma regarding mental health. But I think sometimes you don't go because you don't want to hear the real truth, or a lot of times you go to the wrong professional. And it's very easy to get a prescription for something these days. And it's just like putting a Band-Aid, on something. It's not actually dealing with the issue. So I think it's really difficult for people to get the help without, like Kim said, advocating and searching and being the squeaky wheel, because it's just not there. We're not at that place.
Yeah, it's still some work there. From the teacher's perspective, and one of the issues that continues, and back to the other podcast, is it's just so fascinating how as a culture we don't seem to value education, and there's a real lack of value for teachers, and we still see oversized classrooms, and there's overwhelmness, and there's so many issues within the teacher's perspective that we don't have the time to necessarily get into all of that within this podcast. But I think the mental health and the mental well-being and the resources available for the teachers to take that important time to understand where kids are coming from? Is that there? Is that growing? What are your thoughts around that? What's needed to help that out?
Well, definitely more education for the teachers. I think the teachers are in a really difficult situation, but they are the frontline workers when it comes to kids, because no matter what's happening in children's home life, they still go to school. So the teachers have this opportunity to be able to help these children. But as we said before, the teachers need to be educated in it too, and they're not at this point. So I think that I do think there's talk about it. I mean, there's an awful talk about bringing mindfulness into the school system, which I think is a fantastic idea, because mindfulness, well, that's another topic, but I could talk all day about mindfulness, but even that is now starting to be talked about, bringing it into the school system. So it's starting, but I think teachers just need to be given resources, and right now they're just not. They're barely holding the school together, the classroom together, with so many children suffering from anxiety right now. It's really difficult. It's a difficult situation.
Kim, what are your thoughts?
I would agree. I think, and again, I'm going to take it one step further and say that we need to be having conversations with our administrators, because that's how the teachers are supported or not supported. And I think there's been a number of times where I've had teachers that will do whatever they can in the classroom, but the administration, they're not necessarily being supported to do much more through their administration. So I think we need to, again, be talking about this at all levels, and so that the support is there for teachers, because it's so important. I've had principals who have wanted to suspend my child, and I've had other principals who know that suspension is not the right thing to do, so they will do everything in their power to not suspend the child, and and have the child be kept in the school, because the school community is where they're going to be supported and be able to start to learn the tools to be able to overcome what's going on for them. And if we push kids out and alienate them, they won't want to come back. And there's a lot of research, especially in the UK, that talks about in-school suspensions. Instead of kicking kids out, kicking kids in. And because you see these kids that get suspended, and they're the ones standing at the edge of the field, because they can't come on the school property looking in, because that school is their community. And so we need to keep people in and bring them in and support them, and know that they'll have them know that they'll be supported within that community, that we're going to support them no matter what. And that's really important. So I think having that opportunity to better prepare teachers and administrators, and as you say, teachers are so overwhelmed. I have a number of friends that are teachers, and they just, the number of kids that have what they call the IEPs, or the individual education plans, in a classroom, and those are only the kids that have been identified. There's lots of kids that haven't been identified, that are struggling. And I think Alicia spoke about that, and the families that don't want to talk about it, or aren't talking about it, or haven't figured things out yet, or whatever that means. So teachers are pushed to their limit, and we need to be able to give them tools and resources to be able to manage in the classrooms. And it's a huge job.
So are you suggesting that we're maybe a little bit too punitive in class, and maybe we need to look at a different model?
I think some places are looking at different models. I think that as Alicia said, I think we've come a long way. I know there is, in BC, there are pieces of a mindfulness curriculum available for teachers, and I think that they have the ability to be able to use some of those tools in their classrooms. And I think there are some tools and resources there, but I think, again, teachers are so overextended that they don't always have the ability to be able to implement some of those things. So I want to also just acknowledge some of the great work that is happening, because I do think there are some schools that are really doing, and administrators that are doing a great job. And I just think we can always do better. And a lot of the conversations I've had at the provincial level have, or that I've been involved with at the provincial level, there are a lot of people on board, and they are a very small percentage of the rest of the families and professionals that are really truly struggling across the province. I know in BC anyway. We're starting, and we still have there's always more we can do. But to me, it doesn't have to be. It'd be great to have the curriculum, policy, legislation, whatever it is, those big scale changes. But it starts with us having those conversations and being willing to have those conversations.
Alicia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree. And I think maybe it's, as Kim was talking, I was thinking that maybe what we need is to build bigger communities around our school to support the teachers. More parent. I know I was a teacher's aide for quite a while, and I know a lot of schools do not like a lot of parent involvement for various reasons. But I think if we start building communities and advocates around our schools in general, so that we give them as much support as we can regarding mental and emotional support, and normalize the conversation as often as we can, I think it's a start. It is getting better. I've read a lot of reports regarding the Alberta government right now has given a lot of money towards children's mental health. And I'm not sure exactly how that's helping right now, but it's a start, I think. And I think we are moving in the right direction. I just think we have a long, long way to go, especially for the kids that don't have advocates.
Yeah. In terms of the kids in school, right now, I mean, we are speaking from an adult point of view, so we're not there. So I'm imagining this is a perception on our part, but I'm curious, do you think that kids are more aware of mental health issues than maybe when we were in school dealing with this? It feels different from where I'm sitting, but what are your thoughts kind of being more immersed in this?
I can speak, and I would agree. I think I was in school a long time ago, and even though it doesn't always feel that way, but it's. I don't think we were having many of these conversations at all, and I grew up in a family where my brother struggled with mental health, and it was a struggle, and he ended up dropping out of school because he wasn't getting the support he needed within the school system. And he went back after a few years and went into an environment where he was supported and absolutely thrived. And so there was some of that happening in pockets back, and I'm probably 30 years ago now. So I think we've come a long way. And as Alicia said, I think we have a long way to go. And I want to also acknowledge that there are a lot of people, especially in the province of BC, and I know in Alberta, that are working incredibly hard to make this happen. And so I want to acknowledge the great work that they're doing, but we need more people doing the work and more people open to having the conversation.
Alicia?
Yeah, I totally agree with exactly what Kim just said. There is a lot of good work happening, and it seems, you're reading about more and more all the time. It's we're getting there. It's just seems like a slow process. And I know when I was struggling in school, I didn't, with anxiety, and I mean, I had crippling anxiety. I didn't even know there was a name for it. So the very fact that we're talking about kids with anxiety now has, jumped in so far ahead from when I was in school, which was a very long time ago, I admit. But I didn't even know what mental health was, or that what I had, there was a name for, and that it was actually normal. So even that, the more we talk about it, the more kids, I think, will realize that they're not so different from anyone else, and that we all have different struggles, and it just shows up differently in a lot of places. So just having these conversations like you're having, Kevin, I think will go a long ways.
Yeah, I think just to add to that too is one of the things I've noticed is I think that there's actually just how there's so many conversations happening now that I think some of the kids are actually making it okay for the parents to start talking about it. Like the kids start talking about it and they bring that home and have those conversations. And I think some of the stigma that happened many years ago was that a lot of the conditions that or struggles that young people have, if you look at some of the medical diagnoses, a lot of them will say, oh, it's hereditary. Well, then the fear factor of the parents that either it's that they've struggled, or whether they know they have or not, whether they don't have the language for it or the name for it. But now I think people are open to having those conversations and saying, hey, I struggled too when I was younger and I felt like this, and being able to talk about it more. And I actually think that there's some young people that are opening those conversations with their parents rather than the parents opening them with the children. And to me, that's fantastic. And I really look forward to, so what does that mean for the kids of the future if we keep moving in this direction?
Gives us some hope, eh?
Yeah.
A couple other things I do want to touch on, and I just was thinking about it in terms of this conversation. One of the things that we did not deal with as kids was social media, the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even the fact of, our parents never posted pictures on a public website about this is us in grade whatever. How is it different now in terms of the challenge? Is it helping in terms of mental health? Is this, I don't want to say ban social media or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But what are we navigating with this here? How is it helping or hindering in terms of the students and kids in mental health? Because sometimes there seems to be opportunities. If you're watching the series Cobra Kai, one of the things that they were dealing with in that issue in that series was one of the kids was being publicly shamed on Facebook because of rumors that were spread out, and they were posting that all over the internet. So, yeah, the cyberbullying aspect of this, I guess, is where I'm going.
I think bullying just has a completely different face now. I think years ago, bullying was something that you left at school and you could go home and you'd feel safe. And now you carry bullying around in your pocket. I think there's no escaping it now. And I think that's the biggest difference, is that now it's very public bullying instead of maybe just one tormentor or two tormentors. Now you've got people just jumping on board. So, and I think that's why I think it's so important to build children to have resiliency when it comes to mental and emotional health, because it does protect you against bullying in some ways. Because as I said before, bullies have this emotional pain that they don't know how to process. But if we teach kids how to process that, maybe we can stop bullies from, this may be simplistic, but maybe we can stop building bullies to begin with if they know how to process emotional pain themselves. But anyway, that's another topic again. But I think bullying is, it's a completely different game now.
Yeah, I would agree. Sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
Sorry, I was just going to say one thing. Having said that, social media isn't all bad, because on Twitter, there's a huge mental health community on there that are boosting each other up. So I want to say that there is some good to social media.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as well. I have two very different children who have different struggles, and Kevin will know this, but I posted a picture of the first day of school, and I only posted one picture because I have a child that doesn't want to be on social media and doesn't want anything to do with it, and so he was able to say, no, I don't want my picture up there, and my daughter was fine with it. So I think there's, again, building that resiliency in our kids. I went to a really interesting presentation last year on the internet and social media, and it was put on by a researcher who said one of the questions that we should be asking our kids at the end of the day is not just how was your day, it should actually be, so how is the internet today? Because that needs to be one of our open conversations at the dinner table as well. Like, we need to be able to have kids be able to speak as openly about their experiences on the internet as they do about their other experiences. And I think that that has stuck with me. And I've started to talk to my children about that because it is so important, and it's this black hole of all sorts of experiences. And there's been some really positive ones for my kids where they've been supported, and my daughter's felt really supported she can reach out if she's not feeling great. And I think there's lots of people, we've all heard of experiences where people haven't been supported, and it's the opposite, and that bullying and shaming and all those other pieces have happened. And I think we need to be having those conversations about how is the internet today?
I like that term. I really like that. How's the internet today? I might borrow that myself because I think it's important even for us as adults to have that conversation. I mean, like there was a tweet from a male gentleman. Alicia probably saw this because Alicia, I see on Twitter quite a bit, from a journalist saying that if you think Twitter's a cesspool, it's not for me, or toxic because I ignore people. And many women jumped in and pointed out, well, that is not my experience, so I think that's a question probably us as adults need to have as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The last question, and I started to think about this, and I don't know where you're at with this, but one of the things that has opened the door for this conversation in a controversial way, is the series 13 Reasons Why. Are you two familiar with this series?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I saw a little bit about it, but I didn't watch the whole thing.
Okay. Maybe the broader question about this is not just the social media perspective of it, but for those who don't know 13 Reasons Why, the first season was about a reason why a high school girl, she records 13 different tapes about why she ended her life, and they're surprisingly, somehow they came up with a second season, kind of the follow-up a little bit about how kind of the follow-up of like some of the things that were left open, I guess, for season one, and they touched on some other topics in that. Is the media perception of this helping, hurting? Where are we lacking on this, do you think? Like, is it like, it feels like it's encouraging a conversation, but how do we direct it? Are we in a conversation that we can direct in a little bit more of a healthier manner?
I think the tides are turning, to be honest. I think lately I've been really noticing, it used to be a lot about social media, and the media was public shaming everyone. And even the story yesterday regarding that actor from the Cosby Show.
Yes, Jeffrey Owens, yeah.
Yes, and it started out where this person was publicly shaming him for working in a restaurant. And the amount of people that commented on that about the public shaming, I thought showed a bit of a shift, that people are tired of this kind of media, and they're starting to kind of take back the power. So I think the tide's changing a little bit. I think we were going in a really bad direction, but I do think it's starting to, that's my perception of it anyway. I do see a shift happening. And I think more and more people are actually speaking out against the shaming, and they're speaking about mental health. And I see it on Twitter anyway. I'm not sure about any other social media forum, but on Twitter, I really do see there's a lot of support against the shaming now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think media has definitely they're pushing limits and boundaries, and we all have different boundaries, right? So it's going to affect different people different ways. Kevin, you spoke about the 13 Reasons Why show, and I actually chose with the first season to watch it with my daughter, and I had said to her that if she because she came home and said, "Oh, everybody's watching it, I want to watch it," and I said, "Okay, well, let's sit and watch it together." And so no matter how painful that was for her, I did that, and we talked about it. It gave us the opportunity, like we didn't go into it in depth and have a huge conversation at the end of each episode or anything like that, but it gave us the opportunity to talk about it, and I could ask her questions and she could ask me questions, and it opened a dialogue, and for me, that's how I have used media in our family is an opportunity to open a dialogue, and to talk about whether you agree or disagree with it, right? And talk about your reasons why, and what your experience is, and what you would say if you were asked, and those kinds of things. So again, it goes back to having those conversations, and doing that at a variety of different levels.
Yeah, that's where that's important. So normally my end question is there anything else that we need to talk about? And the answer to that is obviously there's a lot more things that we need to talk about. But we're close to an hour here. So for me, this is, if you were me and you're sitting in my nice little comfortable podcast chair here, and you wanted to take this conversation to the next level or the next step and dig a little bit deeper, where do we need to go?
One of the things that, for me, I think that we need to talk more about is men and their mental and emotional health. And because having two adult sons, I now feel really good about the fact that we can discuss anything with them. And we've talked about, the perception of men not being able to talk about emotions. And Kevin, I think we've talked about this in the last time. But I do think men are starting to open up a little bit, and we just need to give them permission. So I think you're in a really good position to discuss men's mental and emotional wellness. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'd love that. I'd listen to that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting because after everything that happened with the previous project, I had some kind of private suggestions that I don't talk much about what happened, and to be kind of careful in terms of that situation. But I've been I feel like I've been somewhat open about, not necessarily not talking about what happened, but the feelings around it. I feel like I've been open about it, and I don't know if that's going to cost me my career or not. Who knows? But I feel like for men, and even in career senses too, I wonder, like, there's this, you have to be quiet, because if you say something, it's a career killer. You got to be really careful. And forgetting the other side of that is, like, no matter how you look at it, there has been some damage done in some ways. That is, whether it's a right decision or you feel it's a wrong decision or was completely justified. There's a mental impact on that, and I don't know why we can't talk about that. I don't understand how that becomes a career killer. Like, I'm sorry. I moved out to a place and I feel sad that it didn't work out. Like, why is that career damaging to me? I don't get it. Because if anybody did what I feel like I'm ranting a little bit, so just bear with me. You got me kind of riled up here. But,
sorry, Kevin.
But if anybody moved out or transitioned in some way and it didn't work out, of course you're going to be angry. Why are you not going to be angry? And why is it wrong to say I was angry?
That goes back to what Alicia said earlier about having people talk about their emotions, and that's okay. That it's okay to feel all these different emotions. We're human, and that's the way we're built. And it's about what you do with those emotions, and teaching people that we can have those conversations. It's okay to say those things, no matter who you are.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because I think this misconception that we have that men don't have emotions, and they don't discuss. And I mean, I think you can talk about emotions without talking about specifics.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to, say every little thing that has happened. But I think you can say, something happened and I felt sad about it. And that's okay. And this is how I processed it. Because at the end of the day, boys grow up to be men, and men end up being fathers one day, and all of this cycles through. And, I used to try and talk to my sons. They used to call it after school specials, because they'd be like, oh, she's on something again. She's on a topic. But, I'd be really open with them. And even now I feel like, my oldest son went through a major relationship breakup, and we could talk about that. And he could say, I feel this. And we talked about it. And I said, that's normal. That's a human thing to feel emotions. So I'm hoping that the conversations I have with them, if they choose to be parents, they might be able to be okay to talk to their children. And, it just, and it'll cycle through. That's what I hope anyway. But I think these are really important topics, Kevin. And I think you should, and I'm not saying you, but maybe you can bring on somebody to talk about those kind of things. But I think men's emotional wellness is really, really vital, especially in relationships. And it touches on everything.
And I think, Kevin, I was just going to add that, just to go back to your previous question, which I think relates to exactly what we're talking about, is what else could we be, or what other conversations can happen? I would love to see some young people come in and talk about mental, if we're going to continue conversations about mental health, but some young people come in and talk about mental health, and bring in men, women, like bring in a lot different people to be able to have those conversations. And talk about their own experiences, and also talk. I think what's really important to me when we have these conversations around mental health is about understanding each other's perspectives. And so to have a conversation with a teacher, to have a conversation with a psychiatrist, or to bring in some of the professionals that work in the field, and to hear their perspective, because they're human beings too, like they're people too, and have often come to these professions because of their own experiences, or experiences with their families. And I think, again, it's opening up those conversations and hearing, trying to understand other people's context, and that's something that I think is really important.
Yeah, so I'm going to open that up. If you are a teacher, psychiatrist, professional, have some passion about mental health, I'm going to invite you to this table that we continue the conversation. There's a number of different things I'm sure that we could talk about. Some of the things that even I was thinking about, it would be interesting to have a parent-teacher mental health roundtable, because we, We do parent-teacher interviews. Maybe we need a parent-teacher roundtable around this. But so if you have a passion about mental health, I think it's important that you let me know, message me, and we will continue these conversations. So this is part one of, I don't want to end this series. I would love to I think it's something maybe we touch on monthly, right? I think it's that important that we talk about it. And if you find it nauseating, sorry, it may not be for you, but there may be for someone else, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And please bring young people to the table because they have a voice, and we need to support them to have a voice, and they're the experts in their own lives. And so, bring them to the table too.
Yeah. Well, we're young, but I understood what you meant.
younger than me. Anyway, I'll just see myself. Younger than me. There's lots of young people in there that have had their own journeys who are now talking about it and working with organizations or just out there talking about it. And I think that's we just can learn so much from people with families have a lived experience, young people have a lived experience. We all have some type of experience, and it's important to talk about it.
For sure. So Alicia, how do we follow you on? You've got it. How's your book going? Tell us just maybe a quick synopsis for those who missed the podcast. Maybe give a quick synopsis about your book, that project, and what you've got going on.
Yeah. Basically, I just wrote it because so many people asked about my journey and how I manage. How I just got out of the house after not wanting to leave for so many years. And I decided to just put it down on paper. And so it's basically my journey and what I learned along the way. And it's got some raw honesty in there that may be a little bit embarrassing. But, sometimes the truth is painful, but it has to be out there. Otherwise, people don't relate to it. So it's going really, really well. And if you need to get a hold of me, I'm on social media at Alicya Perreault.
Great, yes, and she tweets a lot about mental health, so she will chat with you about that as well. Kim, what are some other projects that you are involved with that you would care to share, or?
Right now I've actually turned my focus inwards to really focus on my family, and that's my most exciting project right now because I get to reap the rewards of spending time with my kids every day, and I'm really excited to be doing that. And they challenge me to be a better parent and a better person every single day. So that's what I'm currently working on.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for coming on. I think this is a really important conversation, a seed planter, if you will, to continue other conversations. Again, you can follow me, Facebook, you can find me as a friend, Facebook, Kevin Olenick, Twitter, KEVOLE, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Instagram, KEVOLE, YouTube, Kevin Olenick, and you can subscribe on iTunes, Agree or Disagree the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. We will talk to you all next time. Bye for now.